How many people are on?
Well, I guess if we want to go ahead and start, and if we have technical difficulties.
We had technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Yeah, the recording. will go.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh, you're going.
so she's good. Okay.
Okay.
We are up.
All right, I will call the special meeting to order for June 7th, 2022.
At what time?
Can you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Deborah, is this where you'd like me to ask everybody to please be logged in?
Yeah,
Or will you ask for that?
go ahead.
If everybody could make sure that they are logged into their board docs.
And if you don't have it yet, that's fine. We're doing a test run tonight.
Yes. Okay.
And so one of the things that will be new to our board meetings is kind of a somewhat roll call. That just lets me know that you've all logged in, because if you're not logged in for the next meeting, you won't be able to vote.
Okay.
So that's why she's asking you to log in at this time.
So I'll come in.
If you don't have it
sure
yet,
that I'm good.
I'm logged in and I can vote for you.
Okay, thank you. I
So,
did not bring mine.
so tonight you would say, if we were live and everything, everyone is logged in except for Lane. Lane is absent this evening, and then you've got the confirmation on board docs and on.
Yeah, I think that's what happened before. I'm not seeing it that way yet.
Okay,
For some reason, I know 3 of them are logged in and I can't see it.
okay.
I have to figure that out.
Okay,
But yes, Lane is absent.
Okay. All right. Can I get a motion to set the agenda?
Make a motion to accept the agenda.
Second.
One moment. I am using this, so it takes me a learning curve moment. Madam President, can you tell me who the first and second were again?
Motion by Sherry Wright, seconded by Ed Bryce.
At this time, I wanted to just let the board know that it's not an agenda item, but you were given copies of all the schools' handbooks. It's not in the board packets. Make the public aware you were given that this week.
Somebody asked you a question about it in a few minutes.
so when you set the agenda, we still need to vote on that now, right?
Yes.
So I have a question about board docs. When we make motions and stuff, does the recording go in there, or do you have to type it all out like we have in the past?
Generally, Tom will have a motion already prepared on their screen that he can read publicly. And then if you guys don't agree with it, you can change it when you make your motion. I can make the change in here as you correct it. If you accept what he says, then we can just have the first and second and then take it.
We can't actually vote on that now on board docs, right?
I don't think you can. You can try.
You
If
can.
you're logged in, you can try.
I don't see any place to vote on it. That's what I was.
It didn't pop up.
For the set the agenda, it says motion and voting, but it doesn't, it says
Okay,
move to accept the agenda, but it doesn't.
then are you ready
I
to
don't-
call for the question?
Yeah.
I'll just log it over here on mine.
Yep.
Okay, Frazier is absent. Paul,
Aye.
Hart,
Aye.
Noyes,
Aye.
Bryce,
Aye.
Wells.
Aye.
Right,
Aye.
thank you.
So when we do this live, they'll vote on their tablets, right?
Yes,
Okay, will it show on the screen what the vote is?
yes. that's
Okay.
right. Oh, sure.
Okay,
It will. And if we get it up and running, it did it earlier today. I think it will.
okay.
All righty. We will move on to discussion items. Discussion item A, cell phones. So I know that we've had a couple of what do you want to call it? Some issues and some concerns with cell phones in the school buildings. So we're bringing this back as a discussion to kind of talk about the protocol that maybe we should or should not take as far as cell phones in our school buildings.
So in this handbook, I read the middle school's policy. And this is, Drew, thank you so much, because when everything you did, you earmarked it by the policy. So cell phone policy is JICJ. That's our policy number for cell phones. And then he just, I believe, I haven't looked it up, but you just took it out of policy?
No, ours is actually presently more strict district policy, but that was my request.
Right. So it looks very similar to what Mr. Burris had when he was principal. I checked, I read his before. So many times before. Does it have enough teeth, Drew?
The way that I've written it in our policy, I believe does. The board's policy presently, in my understanding, only prohibits them in bathrooms, but it allows for use throughout the school. It doesn't specifically outline that they're prohibited in the school. And so therefore it becomes a battle when we see kids with a pocket and just know that they're on their person. And the monitoring of that becomes very challenging. And as a result, we've encountered in our school a lot of issues this year. We've had, I can't tell you how many Instagrams of staff members with their pictures taken and they've created Instagram accounts that are just mocking staff members. There's dozens. There's ones where there's pictures of kids, where they're just like trying to get funny pictures of kids, and there's whole Instagram accounts. We've got numerous ones where there's fights, and they're filming fights and building these Instagram accounts and different things. And so it's becoming quite a nuisance. And when they get on social media, there's no way to trace it. There's no way to really nail down who the perpetrator or developer of those things are. And I've tried taking down some of those fight accounts and things like that, and they do not violate these different social media policies. They say that they're totally acceptable. So in my mind, it's become a huge deterrent. We actually lost one of our staff members this year because there was some pretty tough stuff posted on. We could prove who it was. And that was one of the big things that they cited as to why they resigned from the school, because they just felt completely harassed and didn't have any way. So as we discussed that, for us, it's just very challenging to police it. So we have a policy of just saying, if we see it, confiscate it, having it in your backpacks, I have no problem with it. If there's an emergency circumstance, if God forbid something happens, I want those to be accessible to kids to communicate. But then the other 99% of the time, 100% of the time, hopefully, there's no need for it in school. We've got one-to-one devices throughout our students. So there's no circumstance where teachers can be saying, hey, well, I can tell them to do this. We've got that technology on our computers. And so when you look at our policy, it's a little, frankly, a little bit antiquated when it talks about Palm Pilots and Blackberries, which is a few years back. So, I think that it could be done. I actually spoke with our neighboring principals in the middle school and high school arenas, Dolores and Mancus, and I reviewed Durango's, and they all three kind of have more of that language up there, not allowed on campus except for the back. That's kind of the operating standards.
In the high school also?
Our high school?
No, the one you said you talked to middle school, high school principals.
I spoke with Mancus's middle school, high school principal. I think I spoke to.
Okay, so they have high school policies too.
It is the same as the district policy in all three of those districts, actually.
Okay. I guess my question is, do we need to change our policy.
Like our CASB policy, our school district policy, to be a little more,
With more teeth.
yeah.
It's either that, or I think one of Drew's primary concerns, and I don't want to speak for Drew, was that if something came before you guys from a complaint.
Yeah.
And, you went to board policy versus what his handbook
Right,
says.
that's why I'm saying
Are you
that.
going to support his policy or board policy? So
And that's why we're doing it this way, because the board needs to, by vote, accept the handbooks. It doesn't make them policy, but it makes them something that the board will support in doing. So not sure if it should be in board policy, but certainly in student handbook.
And you make all your kids bring back a signed from parents, we've read this and we understand these policies.
As best we can.
Yeah,
discuss it. That's-
right. Right.
I like the word what you said, make. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it become more of a, I mean, I don't know how many, like you were talking about some of the harassment situations, and you can't nail it down to who it is or anything like that, but is it becoming more of, it is occupying, it's tiresome, occupying so much of your time, just trying to navigate all these kids with their cell phones, and it's taking away from time that you need to be doing something else, that it's become, such a burden to try to just confiscate all these phones or whatever it is.
I wouldn't say confiscating phones. I feel like our staff really is pretty strict about that. There's still, our policy last year, we adjusted it to really say that we're not allowing them, but it didn't say specifically that they had to be in their backpacks. So we've made that more stringent. It does, dealing with these behaviors is incredibly time consuming, exhausting, time consuming, and very frustrating. But beyond that, I would speak from the perspective of the detriment to the learning environment, that it's just a distraction. The things that are happening that we can't deal with are a huge impact on learning. There's a lot of kids that feel very unsafe, and there's great concerns, and there's a lot of harassment that is, in a realm that we have very little purview in terms of the digital world, is one thing. And then honestly, you were at our community engagement, we've got a lot of conversation on the negative impacts and the development of social media. There's so much research out there.
Yeah.
How negative and impactful it can be. So if we can build an environment where we're kind of protected from that for at least 6, 7, 8 hours a day, I think that it would be great for our students.
I think this has to go across the whole district, though, not just the middle school.
Right.
I agree. I think that we need to have some teeth in it for everybody.
Yeah.
Not just the middle.
Everybody's got to be on the same page.
Yeah, or it's not gonna work.
Across the district, we'll need to work on our district policy.
Yeah.
You can.
But if we're just doing it in the middle school and high school, then we just need to approve, correct?
How much of a problem is it in the elementary school?
We had this conversation in our admin meetings, and it's minimal. I would say that it's probably trending more frequently.
Sure.
But it's not as pervasive as it is in the school and high school. But my conversations with they're experiencing the same thing. He had the same general sentiments to the extent that he had staff members requesting that they check kids at the door for cell phones, which is just impossible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, can't do that. So basically you have a no see, no tell rule. You don't see the cell phone, you don't chase it.
Right.
But if it goes off, or if you see a kid taking pictures, then you chase it.
So if you see a kid walking down the hallway and it's in their back pocket,
Well, I'm going to be honest, that's become a challenging thing, because then there's accusations of, why are you looking in my back pocket?
absolutely. That's, you know what, that's where I'm gonna go with the next thing is, you know what? My next is, I that's the whole dress code thing. And that's something else I think we really need to look at too.
We have, a lot of times what we'll do is kind of collaborate with different staff to say, hey, we will address that person, but, you know, I think that if we, and where we found success, when we have found success, is that it's just consistent across and everybody really does it hard. But I think to Mr. Parr's point, if we have you know, policy, like the handbook and the district policy, it makes it a lot more, there's a lot more teeth. Because
Sure.
when we come into it, there's a lot of pushback.
Absolutely.
But when we get parents here that go, that Drew is terrible with cell phones and he took my daughter's cell phone away and he did this, I can, or we can say, we're following the handbooks. Done.
How do you know that you had a cell phone if you took it away?
Mhm.
Was in the backpack, he doesn't search backpacks.
Right. Anything to add, Jim?
No, I mean, I think at the elementary level, like you said, the most part, the rule is students can have it, but it's going to be in their backpack all day. I know at Lewis, we always tried to consider long bus rides and kids,
Mhm.
Right.
you know, those bus rides, but
Sure.
large, to Drew's point, it's not as rampant at the elementaries, but you know, a lot of things that we used to assume were secondary issues are now drifting into the elementaries. So particularly at your 4th and 5th grade levels, so.
Well, I read in one of the elementaries that they have a cell phone policy already in it, saying that it belongs in the backpack. You have on your person, but it has to stay in the backpack. I didn't make a note on which school it was.
Well, I know that's how we approached it at Lewis.
So it's probably again.
Well, and I think in the long run, it's gonna make it a lot easier when they get to the middle school and stuff. If we start there,
We start out.
Right.
Sure.
accustomed to that. That's, you know,
Well, I think the sad reality too is anytime there's like a TikTok sensation or Instagram sensation, it always I mean, you know, I have a 15-year-old daughter and she doesn't watch TV. She's just on her phone all the time. I mean, that was like, when I was a kid, you know, it was TV, get away from the TV, go do something else, get outside.
Right.
But I mean, she's just on the phone. So I know that that's all she does is look at these different accounts and it doesn't take much to influence kids these days into doing crazy things. I mean, some of the things that have come through those social media platforms are so absurd that they're life-threatening to people. in some cases.
Absolutely.
yeah.
So I think the more levels of defense we can provide against that, I think the better the environment will be.
Right.
So I feel like the high school needs to have that same, like copycat the middle school's cell phone policy then.
And
As
I
with all
haven't
the
read the
other-
high school, so.
But yeah, I don't think it's nearly as strict. And maybe it needs, if we don't change the policy, we need to change the handbook for every school.
Absolutely.
That they all need to say the same exact thing.
Yeah.
So every kid has the same understanding of, and parents.
So that comes back to if every school's doing it, do we change our district policy?
I would suggest you keep your district policy one way, but they're actually signing to consent.
No,
to the
I
handbook.
understand, but if we're going to say every school needs to have this policy in it, and we don't have it in ours, then it's kind of like, what's good for B is not good for me. See, I just think that we need cohesiveness.
Mhm. Well, I think administratively, what I would need to do is sit down with all the elementary schools and their handbooks and go, we need to make one.
Right.
And the middle school and the high school need to reflect each other. Back when I did the one that's in here, I didn't consult with the high school at all. Everybody was real autonomous then.
Yeah, they were.
I mean, could it be our policy basically will revert back to each building level, the policy in their handbook type of a thing? That we
Okay.
will, because they're probably each going to be maybe tweaked a little bit, but
Right.
Typically, it's like any other government, right? We have a standard at this level, but they can be they can be more stringent, but they can't be less stringent.
Right.
So the schools can use policy and then add to it, say, yeah, this is district policy, but at this school, this is what we do too. And they can do that, because- and then we still have our district policy, just like federal government law versus state law kind of thing.
Right.
And handbooks can be changed quicker than your district policy.
I agree, but I'm willing to bet you that at some point next year, a child's phone is going to be taken, and they're going, and just use Drew for an example, he says, you signed this policy book.
Right.
Yes, but I looked at district policy, and it's not the same thing, so
Yeah.
you're punishing my child,
I-
and then we're going to have a one year, or
Mhm.
you're going to have a new one.
Right.
So I'm just, that's what I'm saying is cohesiveness.
Right.
We need to back each other
Let's,
up.
and I think we look at the new policy from CASB and see what it is.
I agree.
Kind of compare that as we move forward. And
Now, we,
fixing
you know,
these.
we can say there are no cell phones allowed in the school unless they're in the backpack and be taken on emergency. We can put something like that in there, and
Sure,
then the schools can put the teeth in there.
right.
If First offense, second offense.
Right.
But we can make the statement, no cell phones. So
Mhm.
Well,
they have to be
why can't we use
backpacks.
on the district policy, even say that as a district, we support building policies too.
Yeah.
As defined in your building.
So that if somebody questions, like what Kyle said, we can revert back and say, you know, that's what our
Right
district
here,
policy is saying that
says that we're agreeing with,
Yeah.
that we
we're gonna
have,
support the building policy, whether it's at the elementary school, the middle school, or wherever, that.
because
that's
if
what we
we've
support.
approved it, if we approve the
Mhm.
handbook, then we are supporting that.
That's the ticket, is that it forces the handbook to be in your peer review every year. because
Yeah,
you're
it does.
essentially-
Mhm.
So we have to make sure that we
Well,
read it.
okay, maybe do we need a district policy for cell phones, or do we just approve the building cell phone policies? Do we even need a district
I think
policy?
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need at least something in there on it instead of, that's leaving the schools hanging loose.
I doubt like the new CASB policies, I'm sure they address it. So
I'm sure they do.
if that's the case, I
We're
certainly.
in the process, I assume.
Yes, we are.
So,
But I would like to see this policy that's at the middle school adopted by all the other schools too. I think, I like this policy for the middle school, and I think
yeah,
that
I do too.
if we are all on the same page from kindergarten through the 12th grade, then we're,
Take any parents by surprise.
yeah, yeah,
After next year,
Yeah.
it's old school.
Anything, you'll be contacted in the next couple of weeks about it, if there is any.
Sure.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
And, you know, I mean, we expect that uproar and people, the biggest thing that I think that they are concerned about, and I was talking about this with a family member today, and, you know, they want to say that that's their safety mechanism. It's a safety issue. But, you know, when all of this whole safety issue started and cell phones started, we were informed that if, God forbid, there is an incident in a school somewhere in our district, and every kid gets on their cell phones, they're not going to work anyway, because they have overloaded the cell phone towers and then they don't work. So it's a, you know, it's an issue that become, if that's what they are begging for, then that's what happens is your
Well,
cell
and I
phones don't
think
work.
to your point, I think, and I might be mistaken, but it seems like in some of our safety meetings, law enforcement stated that they could like discontinue self-service in that particular area
Mhm,
while that incident was taking
Right,
place too.
right.
So,
They can, so.
Which at times may be good and at times may be bad.
Mhm.
Every situation's different and you can't write that story, so,
I
Maybe
think
never
probably
live it.
yeah.
one of the things we, need, you know, with the policies, just make sure you're sticking to the policy and holding each student accountable, and if there's fair and consistent across the board,
Right.
and that it's, you know, this is what's going to happen, and make sure that it happens that way every time. As time consuming as that will be, but maybe they will you know, go, okay, they mean business. We're not messing around anymore. I want to have my phone, you know, and maybe go.
The first month, it's gonna be hard.
But like, we've been
Always
fighting
is.
this battle for a while.
Yeah, but you know, to Drew's defense, they've done a great job. When I was subbing, they do a great job with that at the middle school. They really do. And they have a way that they do it and they bag them and tag them and they go in a certain drawer and you know,
Good.
there's Drew and his administration have a good way to handle it. They really do.
Well, it's not our place to tell them how to do it. It's
No.
our place to hold the policy.
You're right. Absolutely.
I'm quoting you.
So basically, we probably just need to look at our district policy and kind of,
Yeah,
and check out the new CASB policy and
We
just
will-
kind of
we
wrap that
actually-
around to,
Deb, we have access to the new CASB policies, right?
Yeah.
We can search that one before the next meeting.
I needed to know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Said that Cassie went out to us before next meeting.
This policy, the cell phone policy.
That's what I'm saying, the one that Casby has though.
Right.
Can you send that to us? Because we don't have that actual stuff yet, right?
Yeah, there's.
You send that to us for the next meeting so we can look at
But
it.
I've always had the ability, because we paid for it, to log in and just get like one or two.
So you'll send us that policy.
Just a one page or whatever, if you could email it.
JICJ,
What was the letter?
JICJ. That's a, Drew, thank you. That was good. I see where you backed everyone in your things up with your policy.
Yeah, that's good.
JICJ.
Jay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
See,
J is
One
for Jack.
one thing I have a question, Drew, is this back part of this handbook you have, that you gave Deb. It's really outdated.
That's mine.
Oh, this was yours? This part was yours?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, no wonder it's so outdated. Yeah, there's a lot of names in there that were like, where did this come from?
So
it was just for
I have-
reference.
Oh,
Just to compare and contrast.
okay.
So Drew, just because you're here and like we're talking policy, what is tier 1, tier 2 restorative?
So we are working towards, it's been a gradual process over the years of becoming restorative practice in schools. Our students are not coming in with behavioral expectations of capacities, and they don't understand reparations. And so basically that tier 1, tier 2 is, there's a few things that we're working on. This year, like when they had the first circumstance where they're putting OCD, basically they would go through a questionnaire, and it's just a questionnaire. This is what happened, who did it impact, how would you do it differently, and kind of spells out some of those things, gives them an opportunity to kind of address how their behavior impacted others, all those kind of things. Typically, the tier 2 is a little bit more intensive. They actually have to go and do some research, kind of talk about some family history and some research about kind of, what's the word? Community and civic standards of this type of behavior and kind of doing some research. So, for example, sexual harassment, when I had to do my 2-page paper on sexual harassment and some of those things, and some of those key into their cases, or something like that.
Okay,
And tier 3 gets a little bit, with that, we do kind of sort of conversations for them. Those kind of things. And so it's something that we've been developing. One of the things that we're trying to do is there's a program called Bop and Life Skills that really deals with specifically drug and alcohol, but also has some things in terms of physical aggression. And it's basically where they can watch a course that is, pretty short, but there are little classes that kind of talk about those things and really teach these skills and appropriate, civil responsibilities of individuals and how to respond and react to those things. So it's kind of teaching kids, but also teaching them that they can, it's not just, frankly speaking, a lot of kids come in and there's a problem, they get yelled and screamed at and in trouble, but there's no opportunity to fix the problem afterwards and learn behavior. So that tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 is kind of along the lines of these infractions where they're kind of getting a more intensive level of restorative.
so is this on their own time or do they do old school,
It's-
in-school suspension,
It's
out of
in-
class?
It's in school suspension, they do down in there, so in addition to completing their work, you know, they don't have the passing periods at lunchtime, that's the things that they're working on.
Thank you.
Hey, any more discussion on cell phones? All right, we'll move to discussion item B, proposed budget 22-23.
So I'm gonna go ahead and apologize, Kyle. It's not on the board docs one. That's why this is a practice.
Oh, but it's on here. It is.
That's all that matters today.
Over this here, last agenda like this, huh?
All right, good evening, board president, board members. What I have here is the detailed version of what I provided you at the last board meeting. Last board meeting, I provided you a summary of the proposed budget. This is the details behind it. So. I will do.
Easy.
It's a 100%.
Yeah, Kathy.
I've been looking for capital funding and I couldn't find it. I'm going, oh, look, here it is on the first page.
All right, so the first 3 pages in there, the first is the appropriation resolution, and this is kind of a summary of the whole budget as well. What this shows is how much money the board is allowing for expenditures of each of these funds. So this is based off how much revenue we're either gonna get, or it's in the case of like federal grants and state grants, it's how much money we're gonna get and spend. Because it's like you get it, you spend it all. So as you can see here, you have your general fund, your special revenue funds, bond redemption fund, that's our bond for the high school, the abatement piece there. Capital projects fund, I'll go into detail on that more
Okay, that was
in
my
a
question.
minute. And then the internal service fund, that is our self-insurance. So total appropriation for everything amounts to $45,708,232. The next 2 pages.
Do you want us to do questions?
Do you want to,
Pages or-
I can do, we can do questions now.
As we go
As we
through?
go
or-
through,
Yeah,
it'd be
let's
easier if we
let's
do
do
it as we
it.
go
Yes,
through.
I'll stop for questions after every page.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, that'd be great.
Questions?
Okay, so one time. The insurance reserve, where we at as far as on track as far as the savings and everything for that?
So that's where I didn't know if it'd be easier if I went through the whole thing and then questions, because this is a summary of every single one of these budgets, and I was gonna go through the insurance one.
Okay,
Now,
okay, that's fine.
So
And then the other, on the bond redemption, when is that bond?
That was my
Later.
question, so. yeah.
when is it completed?
Yeah, when does that pay off on that?
We have, I think, at least 7 or 8 more years.
7 or 8?
And we pay how much each year?
So go to
You've got $1,410,508.
correct. And so that includes both principal payments and both interest payments that we pay twice.
We pay, so 2 million twice a year.
So that total amount, so
Oh,
it's
that
like,
total amount.
yeah.
Half of that each time.
Okay,
And
and
then
that was
what,
what I need.
what is involved in risk-related activity?
That's our self-insurance fund.
Okay.
So that's essentially, because we're self-insured and we don't rely on an insurance company to pay our bills, we have a separate fund for insurance claims. So that's how much money we typically, or we're anticipating on paying on insurance. The other piece of this though, is we're also anticipating getting some revenues from paying into the insurance and everything else. I just have to have the blessing of the board for that expenditure at the end of the year. That's how much we're gonna spend on it. And obviously, we try to get revenues, but the last 2 years, we haven't got as much
We had
revenue.
to transfer that.
Paid more than we had.
Thank you.
So the next 2 pages are essentially the permission of the board to give me to spend from the beginning fund balance. Now, let me explain kind of what that means here. On the grand scale, when we talk about fund balance, we're talking about like our reserve or our savings, what we have on the side. But each individual fund also has a fund balance. And some of those funds require you to spend it down. So for example, preschool fund, you get money and you spend it, But one of the things they want to see is that you spend all of it. And if you don't, you have to explain why you're carrying money into the next year. And that money gets budgeted first. And then you go to your expenditures. And then so you can have fund balances that you're trying to spend down, and then you have fund balances that you're trying to bring up, or some that you're just trying to keep zero. So what we have here is general fund expenditures. So with everything that took place, we did the salary schedule increase, which increases benefits. We're gonna roll money over this year that we're not gonna spend on the overall, but part of that is what this concludes to. So our savings as it stands now is about 12.5 million. Okay, and last year is 12.6, and this year with this proposed budget would be 12.5. So what we're saying is we're gonna spend $82,000 out of the beginning fund balance to make sure that we can cover all our expenditures next year. And essentially what that means is we don't want to sit on our fund balance if it's more than what we need, right? We should be spending that money on the district.
Well, that's what our audit.
Right, and so
we
that's
need
what
it.
this reflects is we're actually taking $82,000 out of our $12.5 million savings and spending it. And I need that permission because it's $82,000 more than we're expecting to receive. Now, we might receive it, but my budget projections for next year, that's what it's going to come down to.
So I don't know how to ask this. The 12 million, the three, are we supposed to keep money in reserve
Right.
for
So
3
we keep
months?
money in reserve for Tabor, Kinder Morgan, and a 3-month reserve.
Okay, so our savings account it does not pertain to our savings account.
Right.
It does not come out of that.
Right, it doesn't come out of those required restricted
Okay.
fund balances.
All right.
This is everything extra after that.
Okay, thank you.
And then you go down and you see the insurance reserve fund. And so what this is one of those things that, this is our bond here, right? Or excuse me, this is our general liability insurance. This isn't our self-insurance. And so one thing that we're anticipating is it's gonna go up a little bit because we had those claims on the roofs.
Right.
So the difference from last year to this year, I'm expecting it to go up a little bit. And so that's what we're projecting. It's gonna go up.
So it's like capital
Right.
insurance.
Yeah, exactly.
Really paid for the stuff.
Oh, yeah, we always do.
But I mean, that's 55,000 compared to the 3 million that it was to repair the roofs, I think is manageable in this sense. Next, you have your food service special revenue fund. This is one of those funds where if you carry over, they want you to spend that money first. So we've accumulated $219,440. And so I'm trying to spend that down. And because we're going into next year, I have to ask you for permission because essentially it's going into our fund balance.
So I have a note here asking, do we still have ESSER funds for food services?
ESSER funds for food services. So we don't particularly have ESSER funds for food services, but I think what you may be getting at is our food service is going to be free as they have been in the last 2 years. Because we were getting federal money for that. And the answer is no, it's going
No.
to
Okay.
stop this year. We've sent out some communications through our different threads,
Yeah, I've read them. That's why I was asking.
but yeah, we're kind of prepared for some of that backlash as well. And then the internal service fund risk-related activity. We still have 3 more sets of invoices to finish out this year for our self-insurance fund. And if everything stays as it's been, we're not going to deplete everything as we thought. We'll still have a couple $100,000 left over. This is what we have left over in our reserve to go into next year. So we thought we were going to spend it all because it was $500,000. This is what I'm projecting. But like I said, I have to project and I don't know what the next 3 weeks look like. So this could change, but that's kind of what we're thinking. So total appropriation used for beginning fund balances is a little over $1 million. All right, and then here, so I wasn't paying attention.
Oh, I got you. That's okay. I wasn't either.
So this page is your general fund. This is a summary of your revenues and total allocations to the other funds and total allocations to charter schools. So we're anticipating receiving around 27 million in revenues this year. And we have about 21 in expenditures. So I mean, we're seeing quite of an increase in revenues this year. However, that doesn't take into account the money that we send to the allocations to the charter schools. And then we also allocate money out of the general fund to the technology fund. We allocate money to activities and athletics. We allocate money to the preschool fund. We allocate money to food services, and we allocate money to capital reserve, and then we allocate money. So there's lots of money that come out of the general fund. Those are the allocations. So when it says that total allocations, that's what they're referring to.
So we're getting more money because of PPOR.
PPOR and ESSER 3. So
First of all, thank you for going back a couple of years on this every time, so we can see
Yeah,
those
that makes it
trends. That's
nice.
a big help to me. See that. On the revenue from local sources, though, on their proposed, you had 11,530,000 for taxes, from local sources, which is lower than it was in 2021,
right.
based on assessed valuation and stuff of the district.
Right, so what this is based on is actually, the state does what they call state runs, and they say, this is what we're anticipating your property and specific ownership taxes, and this is what our state share is going to be. So they base their state share on their anticipation of our property taxes. So this comes straight from one of the runs from the legislators, and really the property and ownership tax is calculated after they figure out their state share. So they figure out how much they can give us a state share, and then they appropriate, say, okay, this is what we think they're going to get specific.
So it's really not based at all on our assessed value.
No, because
Okay.
the thing is, the last 2 years, we've received more specific ownership tax and local property tax than they've anticipated. And I was talking to the superintendent about it, and I think one of the reasons why is our property values have skyrocketed the last 3 years. So obviously they're going to pay more property taxes, and I don't think the state is that involved in our real estate prices here locally.
Now then, there's a ballot initiative trying to freeze property taxes. Now, what's that going to do to us?
Really, for us, I mean, it's probably a good thing for us because I feel like it's getting inflated, but there might be other districts that benefit from it. I'm not sure.
Well, right now, looking at this, I'm more concerned about us.
Right, no. Yeah, and essentially what happens too is as the state sees that number go up, that they just cut our state share next year. So it's ongoing battle. All right, and then so the next page is just detail of revenue. So this is just a breakdown of all the revenues from the previous page. Really, again, we're looking at a little bit more money from the state. But really, it's the extra, it's extra money we're seeing from all the federal grants that's making it really look like we're getting a lot more money than we are. Because in a couple of years, it's going to go back to looking like previous years. So the next page is just the detail, finishing detail of those revenues. Revenues consist of federal, state, and local sources. So that's how it's broken down. Then at the end, you have your transfers. So you have your transfer to your technology fund, your transfer to middle school, and high school activities, insurance, school nutrition, and capital projects, and then allocations to the charter schools. The next set of pages, or like I said, the next page is the breakdown of the expenditures at the building and department level. So we have all the schools on top, we have all our departments in the middle, and then we have all of our other support on the bottom.
And is this for students?
So this is overall, so like, for example, if I look at Manal Elementary and I go to the top, this is their operating budget and their salaries. So then if I go to the next page, that's where we're talking about what is it per student, right? And so historically, it's been I think 142 per student is what we allocate to operation.
Well, I was just trying to figure out how you came up with different numbers.
Right, and that's what it is so it's a few different things. It's their salaries, benefits, and their operating budget. Operating budgets didn't change much because our FTEs didn't change much from previous October at the building level. But salaries did because we had our salary schedules.
Right.
So you're gonna see a slight increase in everywhere except Manaw. And the only reason is because of the vacancies we had last year and the vacancies we have this year. I don't anticipate it. And we didn't spend all the money that was there in the first place. I don't anticipate it being much more than it was before.
Did you read my paper beforehand?
What's that?
Did you read my paper beforehand? That was the exact question I had written.
So, yeah. I've got my little list on, clicking off as you.
So then we go to the next pages and this is a breakdown of the schools as far as their salary, benefits and operating budgets. Next page is in the departments, and in the departments, you're gonna see some changes. And really it has to do with salaries because the last 2 years, the HR director, the assistant principal, the federal programs director were put in places that really didn't make sense when you're looking at an organizational chart. So for example, they had the assistant superintendent coming out of the HR budget. So last year, the HR budget might have looked bigger and this year it looks smaller in salaries, but then you're gonna see the superintendent budget salary go up because I placed the assistant superintendent in that category. So it's just moving salary money around to make sure
But
it makes
that's
sense.
possibly because our
Exactly.
our
changes.
assistant superintendent was
Was
over
the HR, right? So I'm just making it reflect what it is now, and that's why the changes are taking place.
Why on the projected budget here, I think on the page before you had on there, that you didn't budget anything as far as substitutes.
Yeah.
So for what I did here, so this is something I changed and I adopted this from some other CFOs around the state. Salaries and benefits are all coded to the same line, right? So all of your salaries and all of your benefits are all going to be coded to 0100 0200. Essentially, breaking that out, it's all coded the same. So when I essentially put a substitute amount in there for a certain amount and I go over that, I have to come to you and get permission to change it. If it wasn't 35, if it was 37, it's 35. I have to get permission because I'm changing a budget line item. But if I put it as salaries and I say the whole amount is here and something changes in between substitutes and changes in between regular teachers, I can work within the limits of my approved budget here that you approved instead of having to come back to you for all those little inconsistencies.
So it is included in that.
Right. So what I've done for this year is just include those salaries and benefits in the salary benefits line. And so, but I wanted to let you see what our final budget was per the way we did it prior to this. So that's what's going on there. So then the next page again is just departments. And then you have your Board of Education, elections, legal auditing, and BOCES services. We had some changes there because we have Word docs now. We have some other things that we're taking on. We're doing the policies with CASB. So there's that's why some of the operational budgets of admin are increasing, is to make sure we can cover the recurring costs. It's not us spending more money. It's things that we've already voted on, but we have to anticipate those costs going forward now. And then the last set are that I call them other supports because it's your gifted and talented, other general education services. And so really what that is that consists of like our leave, like the liability for when we take leave, vacation, when people retire, if people get their masters and they get an additional stipend. And so all those other outside things that still have to do with general education, we have to budget those expenditures somewhere. Special education services, new wings. Right now, there's not really anything definite happening there, but we still in the building, we still have to pay operational expenses on it. So I still have to put money there available to spend on it for like utilities and things of that nature. Other support services, really that's been used as more of a PD district-wide if we've got a curriculum, or there's also money in there to support if we have to send a kid to a facility that we can't service them. So it's just another support budget that we have with utilities. And then we have our charter flow through amounts that we flow through to the charter schools. The next page is, this is our technology fund. So this is one of the funds that we separate out of the general fund and fund it separately. This also includes money that we get from E-rate and emergency communication funding from the feds. So that's the majority of where, if we didn't have ESSER dollars, we'd be buying our technology and our replacement technology. So this is where this specifically comes from. Next page is your Fund 140. This is what the district funds for athletics and activities. And I just want to bring it to your attention because there's different ways to do this budget. And I've worked with different athletic directors. They have different methodologies. But I just want to point out that for gate receipts, so when it says gate receipts up there, that's how much money we're making when we hold a football game, basketball game, all the games, et cetera. Yeah. So as you can see, we made a little over $21,000 in gate receipts. Now, if you go down, we have our participation fees as well from the middle school and high school. But the rest of that money that those things operate on are coming from the state fund. So we're looking at, almost $700,000 that we dedicate to it outside of what we generate. So again, I just want to highlight that because what that tells me just from a numbers perspective is we have a lot of things going on. And I don't know if quantity is better than quality. And so sometimes when I see this stuff, I would expect to see a lot more gate revenue supporting these activities because really it's a lot of money to spend on athletics and activities if you're not seeing a return on investment. So one of the things that I've done is I've talked to a few coaches because I want to make sure that if this is happening, I can show that kids participating in sports are doing better in the classroom. And I have a feeling that's kind of the case because when you're involved in sports and activities, you're probably forced to do better. So I'm going to get some data and some things to support that because I do think that's important. But I just wanted to highlight that because when I was working at Central, we were bringing in like $120,000 a gate revenue. And then there was a limit. And if you didn't bring in more, you didn't allocate any more because we were focused on only certain things. So no rhyme or reason or taking action on it. I just want to bring it to your attention because there's a lot of money being funneled over there. And I think we need to make sure that it's supporting education. And I'm sure it is, but I want to have the data to support that as well.
Good. Thank you.
Then you have your expenses. Those are just coaches and some of the equipment items. One of the things that I did talk to Dave about before he left was setting up a couple additional budgets. One is strictly an equipment budget for scheduled uniforms and things of that nature so that they're not pulling it out of specific budgets for that event. So instead of saying football, you get $30,000 this year to operate, but you also have to buy your uniforms out of that, it kind of kills the whole idea of what they're operating on. So there needs to be a schedule made kind of like the capital reserve plan to say, this is where these uniforms are going to be on this year. And there's going to be a separate budget every year for that to make sure it's happening.
And you locate uniforms, and will the band be involved in this?
Yes, all of
Okay.
them. And that's where I need to talk to the AD and make sure that we're all on the same page as that goes on. The other piece of this is, I apologize.
Playoff stuff.
Playoffs. That's
I knew where you were going.
we created a separate budget that's in it. And I explained this to Dave before he left, but we'll rehash it, is when sports teams make it past their regular season, they go to regionals and playoffs, that money usually is not part of their budget, right? We're not budgeting to send everybody to state because then most of the time that money would be spent. But the opposite is also true. If you don't have money for that, you have to start taking from other programs because you're trying to make it up. So we're going to set aside money specifically for that every year. It's only to be spent on that. And if it's not, then that money goes into the next year and we start over with the same amount. That money is not to be used to support or get extra things for these other budgets that are already created. But then the AD doesn't have to worry about having to go to the golf team and ask for money because he needs money to send the volleyball team to state, right? So just kind of some of the things to help them out.
Thank you.
Now, you also need to understand that some of those also get reimbursed back from the state. And so I think they need to understand that if they get reimbursed back, it needs to go back into
And I
that
think
fund.
that's I'm gonna make a note of that. I think that's something that I need to make sure they understand, because if I don't tell them and they get reimbursed, they
Right.
tell me.
I mean, if you send kids to the state wrestling tournament, depending on how long they stay, and this is kind of wacky with Chassa, I think, but if you have 5 kids that go to the state wrestling tournament and 3 of them only make it through the first day, obviously we're from Cortez, we're not going to send those 3 kids home, but 2 of them make it to the finals, then they're only going to reimburse you for those 2 kids that are still in the finals.
Right.
But you'll still get a pretty good chunk of money back from Chassa for those. The state, if you make it to the state football, any travel with football's a little different on how they do that stuff. And it never covers what it costs you. It's all done by a formula that Chassa has with the amount of kids that are going. They give X amount of dollars for meals per kid, X amount of pennies for mileage for kids, and X amount of dollars for motel rooms for kids. But it doesn't, and there's like basketball, they allow 12 kids and 3 coaches, I think is what they allow.
And I've seen some of them come back, but to your point, I don't know everyone that should be coming back.
Now, like the state golf tournament, there won't be any money coming back from that because there's not an entry fee that's charged to get onto the golf course. It's anything that has an entry, that has a gate into it, so.
But doesn't that check come to the district?
It comes to the school.
Yeah, it goes to LC and then LC.
Yeah,
Okay.
brings it over.
yeah.
All right, and so moving on, the next is the insurance reserve general fund. Again, this is our general liability insurance. Our preschool program, this is gonna change. It's about July 1, it's gonna be called universal preschool, free preschool essentially. And it's gonna involve districts coming together, selecting a head district, and that person's going to be the entity to kind of support everyone. Those conversations haven't started in Cortez yet. Been trying to figure out who's going to be in charge of that and what that's going to look like. But anyhow, as it is right now, it's still Fund 190. It's probably not going to be called preschool program, but it's there for right now. And
Early childhood.
then next, food services. Yeah, this is, as you can see at the top, we've been rolling that fund balance. And so this is just going to let us spend it all and make sure that we're not holding on to federal dollars. Oh, the next page,
Does it break even, our food services? Or do we have to supplement it?
a little bit. We have to supplement a little bit of it, but
I mean, there's
there's nothing we can really do.
raising the prices much more.
Exactly.
Can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, even the adult prices, it was a state mandate that adult prices were raised. I think it's like $4 and some change. And that, yeah, so. The next page is a summary of all of our, what I call our federal grants, essentially. So your ELPA, Council for READ Act, have Title I, all of your title consolidated application in there, all your ESSERs are in there. And so this, what I have here is our allocation amounts of what we have so far. And we're in the process of turning those applications in. So like the whole consolidated application is due June 23rd. So as far as expenditures go, you can see in here that I don't have the expenditures listed. I either have to carry over the allocation. However, for purposes of this, you guys are approving essentially the general fund. So these are included in this report, but you guys can still approve everything without those expenditures. They weren't in there last year. I just want you to be aware. That's why they're blank there.
Well, I have one question. RISE,
Yes.
Sick Brave, we partnered with them?
Yes, that's,
for many years.
that's well, actually, this particular one has only been on for a couple.
This is the third year, right?
Second,
Okay.
this is our summer school.
We get federal monies from, or we get monies from St. Vrain. I mean, I'm trying,
Well,
that one's just
Yeah.
confusing.
So the RISE grant, the not St. Vrain one is a federal grant. It's administered through the
Right.
state, right? St. Vrain RISE, from my understanding, is St. Vrain School District applied for a grant and they included so many school districts and we're one of them.
Okay,
So
so
they
it's not
come to
coming
us.
out of their budget.
Right.
Because I had St. Vrain board member tell me that they were supplementing.
No, they're allocated
So-
to us.
So
Yeah.
I'm just kind of going, oh, is that right? I know that we're partners with
We,
you, but
yeah,
I
we
don't
applied
know
for
that
it
we
and
were
it's just
given.
we're
a-
getting grant money from them.
Okay, thanks. They kind of, because I meet with them every quarter.
So that's just, yeah, and so down here I have your expenditure the same as your revenue, because all those have to be spent in zero. So if we want to go, we can skip the next few pages, because again, it's just allocations for all your funds. If we can go to Fund 228. Right. So this is not all the money we get from BOCES. This is just a specific set of money we get from BOCES for gifted and VSS directors and para reimbursements. So director is their director of VSS that we help cost share. And para reimbursements is if they say you have to have a one-on-one in this class, we do it, we pay for it, and then they pay us back for those through some of the money that they have at BOCES. So that's what the reimbursement is there. Deferred revenue is money that they gave us last year that we didn't spend. So this is, again, this is just a small budget. This isn't the entire
So-
BOCES money.
We give money to BOCES. How much?
So what
It
happens,
belong to a wait for that.
it belongs to them, and then they say, we're gonna allocate this much money to you every year. And then as time goes on, they invoice us for services and then we pay them back. It's really odd. And I don't, and I apologize, BOCES, if I messed that up, because that's the best I can figure it out so far.
Okay, because I thought at one time that we gave them so much. Each school district gave them so much, and then they allocated that.
As the way I understand it is they take, so we don't get certain title funding because we've agreed to let them apply for it. They wouldn't get it unless it was our numbers. So essentially, they're applying on our behalf and getting the money, and then they say, this is how we're gonna split it. And you get this percentage.
Thank you.
Right, and then 229, this is something that I'm probably gonna change next year. Some of these grants make sense not to be included in like the federal grants, but some of them don't. And so like Perkins, for example, the Cozy grant, hometown initiatives, things like that, I think would be better suited to be in this office than myself or the high school. Because there's still lots of little missing pieces. Instead of just me having the general fund and Dean having this piece in the federal, I have 3 or 4 outliers at the high school or different places. And that's, and they're doing great, but I'm just trying to make it more consistent so we don't miss things. And so if there is turnover at that level or this level, it's not just kind of in the air and loses its.
Listen, Perkins, CTE.
Perkins, yeah, Perkins is.
Are you talking to totally managed Perkins for you out of here then? Is that what you're saying?
No. I think just as far as like expenditures and things like that, I don't think that it's not being handled correctly there, but we pay an office, we pay a fiscal grants manager to do that job. And I don't know if it's hindering that person's ability to do their job better on that. Like if they're trying to get reports from payroll on people's numbers and hours that they're working in, having to put expenditure reports to the state and get reimbursed and make sure the money comes back. They can, but I think their time would be well better spent running the program at the school and letting the grants department deal with that part of it. But we'll see what happens. But as it is now, that I didn't touch any of that, and that will remain the same for this year. This also includes like the War Foundation grants and stuff that we've been receiving as well. All right, Fund 230. You probably are more familiar if you aren't all with it. These are 740 accounts. These are the monies generated by athletics activities that's really generated by themselves. And then they get to spend it as they want. And if they don't spend it, it rolls into the next year. And
It's
that's
like-
it.
Their money making
Right.
projects.
One of the things though that's been brought to my attention is like I need to look into some of these things a little bit more. had some coaches and family members approach me about how money is generated and if it's going to the right account. So like we were talking about gate revenue going to the 140. Well, we have situations where there's other sports that may be having events that maybe it's not at the stadium, but it's still a district event. And that money was deposited in their 740 versus the 140. And so I just need to nail down what exactly it should be going to, because in some cases it's making 740 accounts look, and it's not the right way to make it look right. And then it makes it look like it's making money where it's not, it should be somewhere else. So I found that out. I'm digging into that to make sure it's all the same. It's not that money's missing, it's just should it be going to 740 or 140? That's kind of where we're trying to figure things out. Bond redemption fund, this is the money that we have to set aside for a bond. So you can see the top one, the current property taxes, that's our big one for the high school. Actually, that includes both, I apologize, that includes both. Delinquent taxes and penalties is just money that we should have received in the previous year that we didn't until this year. I guess they didn't pay the property taxes on time, so the county couldn't give us the money. So it's just money we get later. And then investments is any money we have in the bank that generates. Then we go to our expenditures. We have our principal athletic general obligation bond. That's for the stadium. And then we have the invest general obligation bond that was for the high school. All right, capital projects. This is probably, I mean, if I would have had anyone to talk about, this is the only one I would have brought to your attention today. So if you look here, this is based on our capital reserve plan, what expenditures end up being here, or it should be for the most part. So if you see in here, we have, I mean, where our revenues are coming from, but I have transferred to general fund of $2.3 million. And so what I want to do is walk through the expenditures and then explain a little bit why this number could change a little bit. So if I go to major renovations for 75,000, that really includes asphalt work at Beach Street and Lewis area. When I look at that 555,174 major renovations carried from the prior year, the reason I have that there is I don't know if the flooring is going to get invoiced before the end of June or in July. So if it gets invoiced before the end of June, that's not going to be there because I'll pay for it out of this year. But if not, I need the money you've already approved for this year, I have to move to next year to be available. And that's what that 55,174 is. And then we go to vehicles. And we did a pretty in-depth, I should say, the new transportation director did a pretty in-depth, I would say, analysis of our current fleet. That includes buses and other vehicles we have over there. And we really need to start replacing and buying a couple new vehicles.
We can do that.
Yeah. One of the things, and just for an example, I mean, we've bought used buses and now we have mechanics doing engine swaps. And it's like, that's not their purpose. That we didn't hire mechanics to do engine swaps for buses. They're maintaining the buses that we have. So in order to fix the current fleet, we need to kind of hit this hard. And luckily, the transportation director we hired is very familiar with state bids and contracts, means you're getting the best price for any of these items because you're going straight to the state and they've already vetted it. So we're looking at purchasing 2 buses and a special education bus this year.
For 549?
No. That would be the buses. We're looking at approximately 110 a piece. And then we're looking at the sped bus for about 130.
You're kidding me.
And then we go to the district activity vehicles. We're looking at a Chevy Suburban for 40,000 to have an additional activity vehicle so that if like the golf team or some other small team needs to go somewhere, they'll take a minibus or a bus. Fleet vehicles, when I say fleet vehicles, I mean like if Mr. Burris needed to get a vehicle to go to a conference, or if anyone for that matter, a teacher or anything, the vehicles we have are not dependable, nor should people be driving long distances. So we need to start to slowly refill those. We have a state bid that Mr. Eldridge got for 21,000 to buy Trailblazers. So we're thinking about purchasing 2 next year and then just putting it on a rotation going forward. And this is just really replacing vehicles that we can't let out anymore. And then this also includes a maintenance truck to replace, to make sure that they don't end up like the rest of our fleet vehicles. So in that case, I think we have ones that we're going to trade in and actually get some money back, but we still want to buy the vehicles. So that's why that's on here. Then lastly is a ban for school nutrition. And one is they needed to update and replace what they currently have. But the other piece is we are going to be providing breakfast at Beach Street, and we're going to be providing breakfast at Lewis next year, which are 2 things we weren't doing previous. And they don't have enough vans to take the food from Kemper to Beach Street, for one, because they're going to be locked up and everything else. So that is one other vehicle that we're looking to purchase next year. That's the total amount of 549.
We're getting a lot.
I'm sure we never got that much for
Did we
our
not
dollars.
go do the state search before?
Before, the preferred method was to buy used buses.
Okay. Well.
So this is, so like I said, if you look at how much the transfer is this year compared to previous years, that's what it is catching up on those items. Plus that 1.57. What that includes is the upgrade to Lewis Ariola so they can do their rooms to make sure that it's more efficient, effective for their needs out there. This includes potentially $800,000 for the practice turf field. Now, we have quotes, and 800,000 is what we got for the field behind the high school. But what my next step is to approach the city and see how they're going to cost share on this project, because they want to be part of this, because they want to hold youth football there if they can try to help us buy this.
That's the football.
It's the practice field behind the high school. So it'd be turfing it, and they would want to make sure that there's security lights and a fence so that it's not just open to everything. But that's the next step on that. And then it includes $700,000 for the possibility of buying mobile classrooms. I just put it in there to earmark. I know the next couple of weeks we have a lot to talk about, but I need to put it in there just so that I understand how much that I'm going to be spending for next year.
How
Now,
much can you buy for 7?
I can buy 2 portables that are 4 classrooms each. So it'd be essentially 8 classrooms for 7. The problem there's, timing. It's going to be a few months if we decide to do anything like that between purchasing and actually getting it. What I don't have on here are expenditures for schools that we're going to be talking about in the strategic plan next week. If I were to add the whole plate of what we would need to do to get those up to par, that number is going to turn into 7.3 million. So that's why I just, and we can change it. I can come to you next year and still say this is a capital reserve request, and we can add it additionally like that. But I just want you to know that's where we're setting at with what we just talked about. But if we decide to do any upgrades or anything in that sense to any schools next year, that'll be additional on top of what we're approving here. Because I don't know what we're going to do, and I don't want to appropriate money for things.
It would be additional 7.3?
It'd be an additional 4.5.
Okay,
It'd be an additional 5. So it'd be an additional 5 on top of this.
so it would bring it up to 7.
Bring it up to 7. But yeah, so just keep that in mind when we go into our strategic plan next year, that's what we're looking at. And there's lots of moving pieces to that number. Lastly is our self-insurance. So as you can see, we have that 231 left over where we thought we were going to spend it. We put that into what we think we're going to make on investments. Miscellaneous, what that is you might remember, we partnered with Magellan to do our prescriptions, and they end up rebating us big checks when there's high dollar prescription use. Over the course of the year, we've received $175,000 rebates back from it. So that's what that is that 175. And then the employee benefit premium is what we received from employees. So this is zeroed out. As you can see, if we get through next year, based on what I have here, our operating reserve is 0. So our hope is that in January, I mean, we can make some changes and we'll start seeing the changes towards the end of next year. And then that following year is when I think we'll really see the bang for our buck. But we're prepared to go into next year, not really, as long as everything maintains, we should be okay. in that sense.
So we can possibly see a change in the
Right. And with that, that's then my rules. I apologize. That's it. I thought it was, but if you have any questions.
We had a lot of questions too.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I had, part of my questions. Thank you.
Alrighty. Our action items, we have one action item. Action item A, strategic planning contract.
Good evening, board. The strategic planning contract, there are all 3 of them in there that I received bids on. One from the Cambridge group is in, I believe, New York. I've used them before, really good group. Linda Paul, who we used for board training, and Tom Sullivan, who was the Superintendent Association President. Linda Paul is the most reasonable, and I do know her work. I've used her before in strategic planning. So I would recommend that the board approve a contract for Linda Paul for strategic planning. It's coming up Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
For those logged in, can you see that motion on your screen? I'm curious.
Yeah.
You kind of middle.
Yes.
Yep.
Worded pretty much the same.
As far as the board. Yes. Okay.
So in the future, you'll see it there, but you won't see the motion piece up here.
Okay.
Unless you can't,
But we can't vote on it.
well, you can't.
Well, we can.
Oh.
Maybe.
Okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to confirm.
Okay.
See it.
Is there any discussion on,
We have to have a motion.
oh. There a motion to,
So it's 14, 15,
Okay.
16, is that correct?
13, 14, 15,
She does it before mine will come in. Okay.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
See mine? I just click on the little piece of
Yeah, you
paper.
see mine will take them.
okay, do I hear a motion to approve the strategic planning contract?
I make a motion that we approve the strategic planning contract with Linda Paul.
I second.
Any discussion?
Yeah. Somehow I didn't get the 13th into my time, so I will have to slip out for one appointment for my mother.
All right.
Change my, that.
So when she calls for the question.
Show the motion?
Yeah, yeah.
Made it.
Yep.
It's not on yours.
What else did it change?
So I need more about
Yeah.
it.
So
I
it's-
toggled over to
you
the
gotta hit
discussion
this.
box.
So yeah, so I don't know. if
I got the last one.
Yeah.
Now that's the last.
Oh, that's the last.
I think it's all pretty well out there.
Sometimes you can.
Okay, Jeanette's playing nice.
Okay, if there's no discussion, Deborah, you can.
Stacy?
I,
Or
I will say that I'm going to vote aye because of your recommendation. But when I read through these, I really liked Cambridge, but I will be my vote.
Noyes?
Aye.
Rice?
Aye.
Wells?
Aye.
Right.
Okay.
Audrey?
Yes. Good.
Swirl. That's exciting.
Good.
No, Mr. Jeanette voted nay.
Jeanette, did you go?
No, she voted yes.
Voted yes.
Take that as a-
Isn't that crazy?
It is.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, this one's interesting. So it's asking to move to adjourn the meeting at 7:25.
Wonderful.
Do we have to have a vote on that?
Done.
Okay.
Meeting done.
I'm like, wait a minute.